I want to show you how you can do swipe controls in Unity. If you ever played a game like Temple Run, the controls are all based on swiping. So I want to show you how you can do that in Unity. And it's about maybe 20 lines of code. So if you just create a new project in Unity and go ahead and right click, create C# script, and I'll just call it main script, and then double click this to open it up in MonoDevelop. Okay, we'll do all the programming in the fixed update function. So go void fixed update. And you can download Unity at unity3d.com. If you don't have it, it's free. So in fixed update, we'll be using the input.touches. This will tell you if the user touches the screen. So these kind of controls only work on mobile devices. So let's go for each touch. We'll just call it T in input.touches. If T.phase equals touch phase dot began. So this is saying when the user first presses their finger against the screen. And then we'll go else. We'll do else if T.phase equals touch phase dot moved. So this is when they're sliding their finger across the screen. They haven't lifted their finger yet. And then let's go else if T.phase equals touch phase dot ended. So this part saying they've lifted their finger off the screen. Okay, so in the begin phase, let's keep track of the initial touch position, because in fixed update it's always being called, it like every 0.1 seconds. So we just want to keep track of the initial touch variable. So let's create a private variable. Let's go private touch, and let's call it initial touch, and we'll just go new touch. And then in the begin part of the code, let's keep track of that and assign initial touch to T. Initial touch equals T. So every time they first press their finger against the screen, we'll keep track of that position. We'll need that later. And then in ended, we can say initial touch equals new touch, just to reset it to like 0, 0. Okay, and now in moved, this is where all the main coding is going to go. First we'll try to calculate the distance. So we'll use the distance formula or Pythagorean theorem, whatever you want to call it. It's the same thing. So distance formula, and then we'll have to calculate the direction. So direction. I'm just putting comments just to keep track of what I have to do. I just like to do that when I'm coding. So let's get the distance between the initial touch variable and the user's current finger position on the screen to see if they swiped it. So let's get the x value. We'll just create a float and call it delta x equals initial touch dot x dot position dot x minus t, which is the current touch position of the user, dot position dot x. And if you notice, t dot delta position, that's I don't know if you can use that, but since fixed update is always being called, and yeah, it's just, I don't know, I just don't want to use that. I just prefer to calculate the distance myself. So I'll also have to create delta y. Delta y equals initial touch dot position dot y minus t dot position dot y. Okay, so then the distance, and we'll just create a private variable for distance, private float distance equals, we'll just initialize it to 0. So distance will equal the absolute value of delta x squared plus delta y squared. That's the distance formula or Pythagorean theorem. So we'll go math f dot square root. Did I say absolute value first? Well, I meant square root. So square root of delta x squared, so times itself, and then plus delta y squared, so I'm going to times itself. So that'll give us the distance between the initial touch where the user first put their thumb or finger down on the screen, and then where they swiped it to at the current position. And we're going to say if that distance is greater than, at least, let's just give it 100 pixels, for example, because we don't want to code a swipe as like 10 pixels or anything like that. So 100 pixels might be pretty good. So if it's at least 100 pixels, then we have a swipe. And let's also create a Boolean value to see if it's a sideways swipe or more of an up and down swipe. So I'm gonna go bool I'm gonna name it swiped sideways equals, and then I'm gonna go mathf dot absolute value of delta x. I'm gonna check if that's greater than the absolute value of delta y. So if the absolute value of delta x is greater than the absolute value of delta y, then we have more of a sideways swipe than an up and down swipe. If the absolute value of delta y was greater than delta x, then we would have more of an up and down swipe. Okay, so let me delete these comments. So we have, if the distance is at least 100 pixels, then we have a swipe. Now we have to determine whether if it's a swipe left, right, up, or down. And we just do that simply by going if swiped sideways, and, so we use the 2 ampersands for and delta x is greater than 0. So if delta x is greater than 0, then they swiped it left, I believe, because if the initial touch position was like, let's say right here on the screen, and then they swiped it, and then they, well, if it was right here, for example, and then they swiped it to about right here on the screen, then delta x would be a lower value for t, meaning it would be a positive value. So this is swipe left. They swiped it left. And then let's do the brackets. Let's go else if swiped sideways and delta x is less than or equal to 0. It's not going to be 0, but let's just do that to handle the case that I don't know, it's just a programming thing. So if it's less than 0, then they swiped it in the right direction. So they go from this left side of the screen and they swipe their finger to this right side of the screen. That will make delta x a negative number. So let's just make the comment, they swiped it right. And now let's handle the cases for an up and down swipe. So let's go else if not swiped, so use the exclamation mark for not, and then swiped sideways, and delta y this time is greater than 0, then they swiped it downwards, swiped down, do the brackets. Some people like doing it like this, but where the brackets are like this and then the closing brackets are like that, but I don't like doing that. I just like doing like this. So code your own style. Then I'll go else if not swiped sideways and delta y is less than or equal to 0. And same thing, it's not going to equal 0, but it's just a programming thing where you want to handle each case. So this is going to be the swipe up. Swiped up. And so the last thing you want to do is you don't want this, since this fixed update is continuously being called every about 0.1 seconds, you don't want it to keep calling this and keep performing the action you do. So let's create a Boolean variable to say that it's been swiped, and if it's been swiped, then don't do it. So let's go has swiped, and let's initialize it to false. And then in here we're going to go and not has swiped. So then at the end of this right here, we can go has swiped equals true. So the next time this fixed update is being called and they already swiped it, it'll go here and say, oh, it's already been swiped, so it won't execute this again until, let's reset it here when they lift up their finger from the screen, and let's go has swiped equals false. So now you can swipe it again. And that's pretty much it. All you have to do is fill in what you want to do when they swipe it. So if you want to hang around, I'll test out I'll create a scene and test it out. Alright, so let's, for swipe left, let's go ahead and, well, let's set up our scene first, and we'll figure out what we want to do when they swipe it. So let's attach this main script onto the main camera, and let's add some physics to it. So let's add a rigid body, and so that it has gravity, and then let's add a box collider so that it'll collide to the ground. And then let's create a terrain, and then let's position this. Well, let's first set up the dimensions. So let's just make it 500 by 500, and then let's position this at negative in the middle. So I think if we go negative 250 by negative 250 in the Z, then it should be in the middle. So negative 250, and then let me just zoom out to make sure it's in the middle. I guess maybe I can make it even smaller, but let me zoom out some more. Well, I guess that's okay. Okay, now let's create, I guess, let's put a light source in there. Create other directional light. So that's kind of like a sun. And then let's just create some random stuff on the terrain. So let's go here and then click on this first tab, click that right there, and I guess let's just create some random mountains. Let me zoom out. Oh, I guess that's the furthest it can zoom out. Oh, no. Okay, there we go. And I zoomed out by just right clicking on the screen and then hitting the S key to go backwards. So I'm just gonna create like some random stuff. Okay, I think that's good. Let's make sure the main camera's still in the middle of the screen. Is that in the middle? Yeah. Okay. And then let's give it some texture. So let's click on the terrain again. And let's go here. Let's see, textures, no terrain textures are there. So let's go assets, import package, and let's go terrain assets. And then just give it a moment for that to load up. Okay, there we go. And just click import. And give it a moment to load all these assets, and it should come up right here. Okay, so now click on standard assets, terrain assets, terrain textures. Let's just use this good dirt. Actually go back to the terrain and click edit textures, add texture, and then drag this good dirt onto here. Click add, and it should automatically change all of this terrain to this good dirt texture. Okay, let's click play and see if the scene's all set up the way we want. Okay, looks good. So now in the script, let's say if they swipe left, then let's rotate in the left direction. So let's go this dot transform dot rotate new vector 3, and we want to rotate on the y-axis because the y-axis is the one that's going up and down. So if we rotate on the y-axis in the negative direction, we'll turn left. So let's go 0. Let's just go maybe 15 degrees to the left, and then 0. And for swiping right, let's go this dot transform dot rotate new vector 3 0 positive 15, and we need an F because it's a float. Let me change. I'll do that after this. 0, close that semicolon, and F right there. And then let's, for swipe down, let's just rotate 180 degrees. This dot transform dot rotate new vector 3 0 180 F 0 semicolon. Make sure you hit Control S to save. And let's go this dot transform dot actually for swiping up, let's do a little jump. So let's go this dot rigid body dot add force new vector3, and we want to add force in the y direction because we want to jump up. So let's go 0, and let's just give it maybe 100. I think that should be good. 0, close brackets, and let's make sure that it's initialized to 0. So let's go this dot rigid body dot velocity equals new vector3. Since this doesn't even have velocity right now, but it shouldn't even matter. If it's going forward, then we want to keep the current velocity. So let's go this dot rigid body dot velocity dot x, and then we want to initialize the y value to 0, so that when we add the force in the y direction to jump, it's always a constant 100. So comma, and then this dot rigid body dot velocity dot z. So this will just handle that if you are currently moving forward in the game, it'll continue to move forward, but if you want to jump, then this will reset the y value to 0 so that it's a constant 100 every time you jump. So Control S to save that, and let's test it out. So go here to Unity, go File, Build Settings. Actually, let's go File and save this scene. And then, yeah, you can just save it. You can just save it in the assets folder. Let's just call it main. And then go to File, Build Settings, Add Current. Click on Android because I'm going to test it on my Android phone. So also we need to go to Player Settings, and if you want to adjust the orientation, you can. I'll just leave it at Portrait, but you also need to change the this bundle identifier right here so that it's not the default. So you can just go com whatever, and then just call it like swipe or something like that, whatever you want. So now hit build, and if it's your first time building for Android, it'll ask for the Android SDK directory, installation directory. Be sure you install the Android SDK before you do this. So let's just give it a name. Let's just call it swipe.apk, and let's save it to the desktop. Let's save it, and then it'll build. While that's building, let's go ahead and open up my phone directory. So I connected my phone to my computer by USB, and let's just open that up. I'll just put it in this directory. Let's see what's going on here. Looks like it's still building. Okay, it's done building. So let's drag it into our phone directory. Okay, and let's test it out. Okay, so I located my APK file. I'm going to touch that and touch install. And then I'm going to open. And let's test out our swiping controls. So if I swipe up, I'm going to jump a little. Yep, and it's jumping. And then if I swipe left, it's going to go rotate left 15 degrees. So that looks like it's working. And if I swipe right, it's going to go right 30 degrees. And then if I swipe down, it will do a 180 turn. Yep. So it looks like that's working. Yep, that's it. Alright, so we just tested it out and it worked. I just want to zoom in on this script in case you couldn't see it. It was too small or something. So I'm just gonna scroll down a little, make sure you can see this script, and there you go.